Good morning, this is Dan Yerman at the American Nuclear Society meeting in Chicago. I'm talking with Dr. Michael Corradini. He's the president of the American Nuclear Society, and for the past year he has served as co-chair of the American Nuclear Society Special Committee on Fukushima. We're going to ask a couple of questions about the report and also the future of the organization's work to implement the recommendations in the report. Dr. Corradini, could you briefly describe the mission of the ANS Special Committee on Fukushima?
Yes, the committee was started by President Joel Kovman back in April of 2011, and its charge was primarily to provide a clear and concise explanation of what occurred at Fukushima, health impacts surrounding that as far as we knew it in the first year, cleanup activities, and major safety issues, and then probably most importantly for the membership, how we can improve ourselves relative to risk communication and information to the public.
Dr. Corradini, the American Nuclear Society operates in a unique space as a professional society. We're not a government agency. We don't represent the industry as a trade association. So we're neither fish, fowl, rock, or air. Basically, our members come from all walks of life. How does this affect the way ANS approached its recommendations that were in the report?
Well, when we started the special committee, our first purpose was to get a committee of individuals that were fairly broad, fairly well versed in the technology as well as areas related to health impact and cleanup activities. So our first charge was really to get a group of people that were very dedicated as volunteers to spend a good bit of time over the next 6 to 9 months trying to understand what occurred and all the associated concepts. So the first thing is got a wide range of activity of members with a deep and very rigorous background. We then tried to make sure that it was balanced from the standpoint that we tried to get people from industry, from government, from universities, so that we had various perspectives on the what may have occurred and trying to explain it.
Now, your co-chair of the committee was Dr. Dale Klein, the former chairman of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. What kind of perspectives did he bring to the report?
I think Dr. Klein brought the perspective of what I'll call pragmatism to what we would look at. As we learn more and more about what was going to occur, or what had occurred, in the accident, and trying to understand health impacts and cleanup, he always brought a pragmatic air to what really was doable. What were the safety issues that really showed that we were concerned about adequate protection versus what we'll call zero risk? Because as he once said, and I think it's a very good way of framing it, is that we felt after we came to the end of this that there really is still adequate protection to the U.S. public, but nuclear power, although safe and reliable, is not risk-free. And so it wasn't our job to make it risk-free. It's almost impossible to do that. So he brought a good bit of what I'll call regulatory pragmatism to the exercise.
You and Dr. Klein rolled out the committee report in March on the one-year anniversary of Fukushima. How did you approach the rollout?
We tried to condense what we did because as we did the report, I smiled because when you get 9 individuals that have various disciplines, all their pieces are very important. So it turned out initially to be a relatively large document. And what we did is try to condense it to really the key aspects that the public would need to understand and put it in words that were understandable to the general public as well as the membership. And then when we did the rollout, what we really tried to do is take even that, which turned out to be 40 or 50 pages of description in these areas I discussed, and condense it further to some of the key items in terms of how we were constituted, what we did, how we went about our job, and then the safety issues that seemed to roll out from what we learned. And basically, that's what we did in the public address when we talked about the report back in, I think it was March the 8th of 2011. We really focused on the key safety issues that would relate to the U.S. public and the industry here.
Now, ANS went to Washington to roll out the report and did a press event at the National Press Club. This gave the report a higher than usual profile of other ANS technical and scientific publications. So the expectations are that that higher visibility might produce new or different kinds of feedback. What kind of feedback did the organization receive about the report?
I think the feedback we got from the report was wide from a number of areas. We've got, of course, questions while we were there from the national press, but then we had a lot of follow-up conversations with both national news services here in the United States, as well as we were contacted by a number of Japanese news services trying to better understand what we were saying. Even months after that, we were invited to go to Japan to talk at a couple of short conferences about kind of I won't use the term lessons learned, but things that would derive from what occurred at the accident. And then further than that, we were able to talk with TEPCO at length just this year about more of the technical details as they're doing their own investigation of the accident.
Let's talk about your trip to Japan. First of all, that must have been fascinating to actually go there and talk with counterparts in the nuclear industry. Can you tell us about the trip?
We went, or I went, I should say, and there were four different events. One was an event where we talked about essentially the key differences of the BWR technology relative to other technologies and how that would want us to, or cause us to learn more about what occurred in the accident, because if you think about it historically, this is the first time any sort of severe accident occurred in a boiling water reactor system, and there are natural differences. So we talked about that in one discussion. In a second discussion, we talked about what potential, I'll use the word post-mortem, what potential post-mortem activities would be done as the plant is being cleaned up and deconstructed so that we could learn more about what actually occurred, because still, even though we're a year out from the accident, we really don't know what occurred. We only can surmise it from small clues and indications of measurements and some remote sampling. In a third event, I met with the president of Aizu University, and this was very interesting to me because he was commissioned by the governor of the prefecture to try to explain to the public of the prefecture of Fukushima what are the long-term health impacts. And the prefecture is relatively agricultural or derives a lot of its activity from fishing. There are some centers of manufacturing, but not a large technological base. So he was challenged with how do you explain it, how do you get the public to understand potential long-term health effects, how do you deal with those that have evacuated to kind of come back to the area. And so we talked about a lot of the experiences he had, what sort of experiences were occurring in the United States because of our nuclear activities, and how he can learn from that. And then finally, we met with representatives from TEPCO trying to understand their perspective on their investigation. And particularly, we spent a good bit of time learning about their tsunami and earthquake analysis. And I must say, this to me was, since I'm a bit of an engineer, this to me was quite interesting. Although they were hit with a tremendous event, and it was a tragedy in many ways, I was very impressed with the rigor by which they do earthquake and tsunami analysis. And their codes and standards in that regard are fairly rigorous. So I think although they tried to protect the plant and develop appropriate countermeasures as they learned more and more about earthquake hazards in the area, they were taken by surprise in this one, and we spent a good bit of time trying to understand that.
Okay, next steps for the committee, of course, is the question. I know there's going to be an embedded topical at the November ANS winter meeting in San Diego. Can you give us some insights into what's going to be discussed there?
Sure. I might preface that by saying that we met at the national meeting that we're at this week, and the committee basically went through the report and is going to fix some small amount of factual things that we need to get more precise in the report and put out a revision this month so that we'll clarify some little factual things. But besides that, we pretty much are staying close to the report as it is, and our next activity, as you said, is to have this embedded topical where we have something on the order of, I think, 50 to 60 papers coming from around the world, both Europe, Japan, India, the United States, where we'll try to get some insights as, again, what more is learned about the accident in terms of what occurred, health impacts, cleanup activities, as well as if there's the need of, and I'll use again the term forensics, as the plant is deconstructed, what should we look for and what clues should we look for to try to understand better what happens in a severe accident.
Let me ask you about ANS's response itself to the report. In addition to recommendations and insights into what happened at Fukushima, the ANS report also contains recommendations about what the society itself should be doing. Can you give us some highlights there?
Yeah, I think we looked at, well, I know we looked at what occurred in Japan, tried to understand what I'll call the interactions between the utility, the government, and the regulator, and tried to take from that and the press response of all of that, and tried to take that and overlay it on the U.S. And I think the biggest thing we learned is that if some sort of unfortunate, tragic event occurs in any sort of industry, but the nuclear industry is we're worried about, we as a society have to be fairly responsive and ready so that if something occurs, we are there to explain technologically as much as we can of what occurred. If we don't understand what occurred, we have to be pretty much straight up with the public saying, well, we don't understand this part of it, we'll get back to you. But we cannot shy away from immediate discussions with the media, because in today's society, I think the public expects and the media in some sense demands pretty much an instantaneous discussion with experts in any field. Okay, we're talking about nuclear power, but it could be chemical plants, it could be the oil industry, it could be, you could name the area of the government or the infrastructure we have to deal with. So that's the biggest lesson, is that we have to be ready for immediate communication about what we know, what we don't know, and then we have to continue to follow up with the media so that we're very clear and precise as to the facts we know up to this point in time. And I think we weren't, to be blunt, I think we weren't ready as much as we should have been when the accident occurred in Japan.
Oh, and you're coming, this is your leadership year, and we're going to talk to you more about this a little bit later this morning. Are you going to be working with the ANS board and members to look at what are the most appropriate investments the association should make in this area?
Yes, yeah. It's interesting. You know, in some sense, I'll use this terminology. Maybe it's not totally appropriate, but with any sort of tragic event, you always have to look for a silver lining in what needs to be done. And in this case, I think the silver lining really is education and outreach. We expected the public to know more. We expected the press to know more. We didn't step up as quickly as we should have in trying to explain things. And I think all of this leads me to think in this next coming year, education and outreach about nuclear science and technology is quite important. And we really have to address a number of audiences: the general public, the media, our leaders, congressional leaders, or our leaders in government, as well as younger people as to what the technology is about.
Now, ANS is doing a series of workshops with Congress right now.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about them?
I have to honestly admit that I'm not sure when that was thought of, but I think it was a marvelous idea. What we have done, and it's turned out to be fairly popular, is that we basically hold, I'll call it Nuclear 101, where we try to bring in congressional staff that are from various disciplines: history, political science, sociology, government, public administration, and we sit them down in a room and try to describe essentially the nuclear technology, whether it be the radiation and how one measures it, its effects, what are reactor systems like, the reactor technology, what is the fuel cycle, where do we get the fuel, how is it used, how is it disposed of, issues relative to security and proliferation. So we've done that. I think it started in November, and we've had a series of 4 meetings, classes with congressional staff through, I think, May or June, and it's worked out marvelously. We've had 2 or 3 dozen people at every one of these sessions.
Dr. Corradini, where can someone get more information about the Fukushima report that ANS prepared?
We have put up a special website which is entitled fukushima.ans.org, and when you go there you can get the report. But more importantly, many of our colleagues at universities, in the industry, in government suggested that not only do we put the report up, but we try to expand the report in Q&A. So there's also appendices that have question and answers about what occurred in the accident timeline, what are effects of radiation, what were detailed measurements of the radiation, what are the cleanup steps. So we have appendices and all of these things that really expand even further a lot of the information we were able to glean from what we did in our year of study.
Thank you very much. I've been talking with Dr. Michael Corradini. He's the president of the American Nuclear Society, and we've been speaking here at the Society's annual meeting in Chicago, Illinois.